Let's say that I've been to before. When John invited me or coerced me to speak, he also tried to name this talk as well, so I had to push back a little bit. Prince or Pauper, he asked me to speak about Prince in the context of this opioid epidemic or crisis or whatever you want to call it that we're facing right now. And he helped me realize the profound impact that Prince's death has had on the performing arts community globally. And when you look at the very few details we have about the circumstances of Prince's death, it really gives us a good lens, actually, for understanding the opioid crisis writ large. I call the circumstances of Prince's death a BFM, a big effing mess. That's about what we know. What we know is a medical examiner's report which said that he died of a self-administered opioid named fentanyl. And beyond that is all unknowns, guesses. Some people claim that he had a pill of opioids that were not fentanyl in his place, next to his bed, something like that. People question, did he have a chronic pain disorder? Was he on opioids long term to treat pain? A family member said he used opioids to help deal with the stresses of being a performing artist. Was he using it for a psychoactive effect to help channel his mind? Was he getting a dopaminergic response from taking the opioids? Did he have an acute pain issue? Some people report he had hip pain and he was taking the opioids to help with a very specific hip problem. Was he using the opioids recreationally? This happened to be a one-off event where his recreational opioids happened to contain fentanyl that he didn't know of, or much more potent than the opioids he had taken in the past. Did he use opioids with alcohol or benzodiazepines, and therefore much higher risk of respiratory depression and overdose? We don't know. We probably will never know. But what's so interesting and fascinating about this case, which has had so much attention, is that it's reflected in so many other parts of society right now. There's so many other cases. When you look at the opioid epidemic or the opioid crisis, I upgrade that from a BFM to a CFM, a complete effing mess. It's a total disaster. And this is not saying anything about our responses to the disaster. The disaster itself is a total mess. And it depends on, how we perceive the crisis depends on where we are looking at it. As a doctor, I look at it from a particular perspective. As somebody who has chronic pain, they're going to look at it from a different perspective. A recreational drug user is going to look at it from a different perspective. The family member of someone who has been impacted by opioids is going to look at it from a different perspective. And therefore, also, that makes us think about how to respond to this crisis in different kinds of ways. And that's the nature of a complex, a very complex, messy, or what we sometimes call wicked problems, or for short, CFM. And the nature of wicked problems is that, no matter what level you look at them from, the complexity gets reflected again. So even within the medical profession, if you treat chronic pain, if you're a family doctor, if you're an addictions doctor, if you're a surgeon, you look at this problem from a different angle, and you see different kinds of solutions. And then besides that, if you look at opioids as a prescription problem versus a street drug, illicit opioid problem, you see a whole other set of worlds, a whole other set of problems, and a whole other set of possible solutions. So, so then the question is, what can we do about this? If you have a wicked problem or a complete epic mess, do we just throw up our hands and say we don't know? Let this problem take its natural course. I think that many of us would rebel against that and say, no, we have to do something. And so one way to try and address these kinds of wicked problems is to simplify without oversimplifying. And to find maybe what are some of the possible control parameters, some of the more simple understandings or perspectives that can be useful in the entirety of the problem. That perhaps if we push those buttons, we're not going to get too much pushback from the system. We're not going to get too much unintended consequences. So another example of the complexity of this problem is the huge diversity of opioids. Currently, we talk a lot about fentanyl. You're maybe hearing some talk about carfentanil, but we also have hydromorphone, we have oxycodone, we have morphine, we have codeine. If you're in the US, you have hydrocodone, you have oxymorphone. There's such a huge diversity of these substances out there. Likewise, they can be taken by mouth, they can be taken orally, they can be taken as a patch transdermally, they can be taken under the tongue, they can be taken against it as a dissolvable film against the cheek, and of course, in an acute care setting, or even now, we have advocates and doctors advocating for safe injection of not only street drugs but also pharmaceutical grade drugs. We have intravenous or intramuscular routes through which these drugs can be administered. Not only that, we have long-acting formulations and we have short-acting formulations, some that last for a couple hours, some that last for 8 hours or 12 hours or 24 hours. So there's this huge diversity just within these drugs. There are drugs, opioids that are opiates, meaning they're derived directly from poppies. There are some that are semi-synthetic, that they have to be then manufactured based on the substances that you derive from the poppies. And there are some that are totally synthetic, that can be manufactured in a lab without having the base substances. And that diversity has a whole other set of implications in terms of how these substances can be regulated, how they can be controlled, how they can be accessed. And we've seen this recently with fentanyl, which we know can be developed exclusively in a lab, essentially anywhere. And so what I help to develop as an educator of physicians, but also my role as a physician, I see myself as an educator of the public, of my patients, is to try and find some of these ways of simplifying the problem in order to understand a little bit better. And one of these concepts that I think is useful is morphine equivalence. If you've been trained in medicine, you've been exposed to morphine equivalence, but actually is very poorly understood. And we've seen this. I teach doctors how to prescribe opioids according to the best guidelines, and even doctors who've identified this as an area of learning, many actually have not mastered or fully understood this concept of morphine equivalence. So hopefully you received that infographic. If you haven't, there's a bunch in the front here. But we have an online version of it as well. And what morphine equivalence is a way, it originally developed as a way of relating the potencies of different opioids. How strong is hydromorphone compared to morphine? How strong is fentanyl compared to morphine? How strong is codeine compared to morphine? And actually, this is a very relevant problem even for patients. I've had patients who say, Doc, I was taking those 5 milligram pills from you, and it was helping to some extent, but I got these 1 milligram pills from this other doctor. I'm only taking 3, and I'm doing so much better. And actually, what's happened is they were taking morphine from me, but hydromorphone, which is 5 times more potent than morphine, and thinking that they were actually taking less, when actually they're taking 3 times as much. And so this is a very relevant issue, a very relevant problem. But originally, morphine equivalence was used to describe potency. And what's changed over the last couple of decades in the context of this opioid epidemic is that we've understood, and this goes back to Philip Seymour Hoffman, actually, that as we increase our morphine equivalent dose, we increase our risk. Now, our risk particularly of medical complications and overdose. Now, this might sound common sense, but if you look back 20 years ago, the teaching was if you've got a lot of pain, you need a lot of opioids. And this started from the palliative care community, in which particularly people are suffering from intractable pain in the context of cancer, a lot of opioids to help treat their pain. And you weren't too concerned about the long-term consequences because their expected lifespan was not very long. But then this got transferred to medicine at large, particularly chronic pain, but other areas of medicine as well. And the idea was, you got pain, you need more opioids. And what we found actually that just if 5 milligrams or 10 milligrams of morphine is good, it doesn't necessarily mean that 100 milligrams of morphine is going to be better. Just like one glass of wine not being fine, a full bottle of wine is not necessarily better. And so if you want to pull out that infographic, I can help you navigate through it a little bit. And what we find is that as we cross these different thresholds of morphine equivalence, your risk of overdose, particularly, but other complications. This is something that we forget with opioids, is that besides increasing the risk of overdose, they increase the risk of medical complications, things like sleep apnea, things like decreased testosterone production, things like actually hyperalgesia, where opioids, especially high-dose opioids, taken over the long term, can actually increase pain or make you more sensitive to pain. And then besides that also, increase the risk of substance abuse and addiction. So let's go through this in a little bit of detail. So you see in that first row from 0 to 50, the important takeaway point is really that there's no safe dose of opioids. That's not to say that they don't have a role in medical therapy. However, at any dose, there is an increased risk of complications, particularly overdose. And this increases particularly when we mix these medications with other sedating medications or substances like alcohol or benzodiazepines. So, and you'll see on the left side, beside the scale, some typical medications that we see. Tylenol number 3. For example, codeine being a lesser potent opioid, typically in doses that are prescribed will fall in this category of 0 to 50. As soon as you jump beyond that 50 milligram morphine equivalent threshold, your risk of overdose, and this has nothing to do with you using the medication inappropriately. Even, and this is a really important point, even if you take the medication as prescribed by your doctor, your well-intentioned doctor who's trying to throw you that lifesaver to help you out of the situation of chronic pain, your risk of overdose increases by as much as 5 times. As soon as we progress beyond that 100 milligram morphine equivalent threshold into the darker blue area, it's a little bit harder to reach that lifesaver. Not only does your risk of overdose increase as much as 9 times, depending on what study we look at, if you are to have an overdose above this 100 milligram morphine equivalent dose, it's much more likely to be fatal. So we see as we keep climbing up further and further, trying to help more and more with more and more severe pain or more disability or dysfunction, and we know this is prevalent in the performing arts community, both on the pain side, as we talked about to some extent, but also trying to deal with the stress and potential dysfunction that comes with chronic pain. As we start to ratchet up doses, are we really helping people, or are we potentially harming them more and more? Our final dose threshold is above this 200 milligram morphine equivalent. And we see actually a lot of people in general family practice, also in chronic pain medicine, who are well above this 200 milligram morphine equivalent. And this doesn't mean that people should never be on a dose above this number, that it's totally unjustifiable. But what I've seen is that patients who are finally given this information, that actually their risk of overdose is so much higher on these high doses, they start to question whether that therapy is helping them or not. And I've seen patients who actually, and we know this, that people who are on these very high doses often will still have pain. It won't take away their pain. And that's actually an unreasonable expectation in the context of chronic pain. An unreasonable expectation for an outcome from being on opioid medication. Actually, what we find is that sometimes people, when we start to dial down the opioids because of this concern of risk, they start to do better. They actually have less pain. They actually can function better than they had before. And there's a certain amount of pride that comes with that, recognizing that this is not a medication that they necessarily have to be on forever. That they don't necessarily, they can actually empower themselves to have less risk of overdose or less risk of complication, but actually maintain or improve their function. So really what we're trying to do here is have a common language. If doctors are speaking one language, policymakers are speaking another language, patients are speaking another language, it's very difficult to have a conversation. And it's very difficult, I think, Kim and I were talking outside before this session about, there's a lot of talk with respect to opioids, and in many cases not a lot of action. And we need to find ways to move the talk into action. And the first step to that, or at least an important step toward that, is being able to speak the same language. And we hope by using this kind of imagery and this kind of communication that a concept like morphine equivalence can help further that conversation.